Hello, demigods, monsters, and gods alike. This is the Olympus Report. Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters, the 2013 sequel to the 2010 Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Was it as bad as we remember? If you didn't watch my 2010 review of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, I just want to say once again that I am not reviewing this as an adaptation. I am just reviewing it as a movie. Was it a bad adaptation? Yes, it was so bad, it made me cry. It's way worse than The Lightning Thief. But is it a bad movie? I am once again going to pretend that the book does not exist. So, let's jump into it. Like I said in my first video of my review of The Lightning Thief, if the movie just planned on being a standalone film, it wasn't so bad as it told a completed story. But if it planned for a sequel, it just left way too much out. The Sea of Monsters' biggest issue is that it's constantly playing catch-up to things that should have already been mentioned in the first movie. Things like Thalia, Clarice, the Prophecy, and Kronos, to name a few. Because of this, the story's format, or the story roadmap as some call it, suffers. Here's a clip from my first video explaining what a story roadmap is. First off, we have the beginning/exposition where our main protagonist is introduced, along with some basic info, as well as some world building. Next comes the inciting incident, the moment that disrupts the status quo of our main protagonist and kicks off the story. Usually we have an all is lost moment. It doesn't always have to come right after the inciting incident, but usually it does. This is the moment that our protagonist is at their lowest and they either need to step down or step up. Now we've reached the midpoint of our story, where even more information is revealed. Then we hit our rising action, where things start to get tense, and we build towards our climax. Then we have our climax, which is the climax of the story. And finally, the resolution. Was the conflict solved? So let's start with the beginning/exposition. First, we get the story of Thalia. Okay, that's all fine. And then I think it was a smart decision to start right back at Camp Half-Blood, as it brings us right back into the story and we get a reminder of all the important information, such as Half-Bloods, Percy being a son of Poseidon, his powers, and the fact that he has a big heart. Here we're also introduced to Clarice and Tyson, which saves us some time. So the beginning is all good, all clear, it's an exposition dump. Then we hit our inciting incident. The bull attacks Camp Half-Blood, once again bringing our protagonist Percy into the conflict of the film. We learn that Luke is alive and he's poisoned Thalia's tree. Now we're at the midpoint where we get even more exposition. We learn of the Golden Fleece and the Great Prophecy. Okay, I know I said I wasn't going to compare it to the books, but the prophecy just makes absolutely no sense. They introduce it to set up sequels and a bigger story, but then they change it to only be about this quest, shutting any hopes of creating sequels. So they're trying to set up a sequel that then dashed any hope of having a sequel. Okay, anyway, sorry. Back to the review. Now we hit our rising action. Our heroes set out on the quest. Tyson tells us about Polyphemus, which is the Cyclops holding the Golden Fleece in the Sea of Monsters, setting up an obstacle that our heroes will eventually have to face. Our heroes receive their first bit of information, or I guess their first check mark, from the three ladies in the cab. They receive a bunch of numbers that isn't clear to them now, but will eventually make sense. On the way to their second check mark, our heroes realize that there's even more obstacles that they'll have to face. It turns out that a bunch of Half-Bloods from Camp Half-Blood have betrayed them and have gone over to Luke's side. These Half-Bloods then kidnap Grover. Next, our heroes receive their second bit of information and complete their second check mark. They meet Hermes and learn where Luke is. They then go and confront Luke. They're captured but eventually escape, only to then be captured again by the Sea of Monsters, where they meet up with Clarice and form a team, and then escape once again. Percy then realizes that he has perfect bearings at sea and can tell where he is, and that the numbers he received from the three ladies are actually coordinates that lead to Polyphemus's island. Our heroes get to the island, and now we hit our first climax. That's right, I said first climax. Our heroes rescue Grover, battle and trap Polyphemus, and get the fleece. But where that should have been the end of the climax, well, it isn't. Luke is revealed to be the final obstacle once again. He steals the golden fleece, ties up our heroes, and plans to resurrect Kronos. Luke succeeds and resurrects Kronos. Our heroes then battle an army of demigods, and eventually Percy is able to defeat Kronos with Riptide, which is this version's cursed blade. Why it's the cursed blade, it's never explained. And then Luke seemingly gets eaten by Polyphemus, or well, that's what we're led to believe. Now we have resolution. Our heroes return to camp with the fleece and save Thalia's tree and the camp. Things seem to be normal until it's revealed that the fleece was too powerful and brought Thalia back to life. Okay, so it follows the format decently, but not perfectly. It's not as clear as the first movie. Certain things were out of order and some things just didn't make sense. Like I said before, the movie's biggest issue was it was constantly playing catch-up to a movie that worked as a standalone film, but not a two-part series. The biggest thing that had me confused was they killed off Kronos, but then they brought Thalia back, setting up the rest of the series where Kronos is the main antagonist. So that just makes no sense as a movie or an adaptation. But besides that major flaw, there's also other things that just don't make sense. In the first movie, Zeus made a rule that the gods couldn't visit their kids. And then in this movie, that rule is just non-existent. For example, Mr. D is at camp all of a sudden, despite being missing from the first movie, and this just isn't explained. Also, Annabeth has a bottle of mist that acts as a perfume that she gives to Tyson to wear, but then later on, this barista has several arms that only our heroes can see and the mortals can't. So is the mist how we know the mist to be, or is it a perfume? Also, Annabeth is just blonde now with no explanation, which I guess isn't too crazy because women do dye their hair, but I feel like it should have been explained. Or otherwise, just leave her as a brunette. It really doesn't matter. Also, why does the demigods on Luke's side use batons? Why aren't they using swords? There's also this weird teleportation device that's just never explained and used throughout the movie. It's shown that Percy can control the ocean, but then doesn't use that power to move their lifeboat, and then they get stranded. With that being said, there are things I did enjoy about this film. Like the first movie, it just looks stunning. The sets, the environment, the shot composition, I love it all. Camp Half-Blood is once again simply stunning and breathtaking. Plus, some of the lighting they used in some of their shots is fantastic. For example, this shot with Luke. I just love everything about this shot. The lighting adds a menacing aura to Luke that just fits him perfectly. Plus, once again, for 2013, the CGI is pretty decent. The bull looks good, Percy's water abilities are flawless, Kronos looks pretty solid. However, Tyson's one eye looks absolutely awful. I don't know what happened there, but they definitely could have done better. And stunts and action were fun and exciting. Absolutely loved Percy controlling the ocean. What a cool moment. And when he surfed on the wave, I cheered. Like, this is Percy Jackson. I just love Percy being Percy. Plus, he used Riptide a lot more in this movie, which I appreciate. Plus, he's got some cool moves in this film, like in the beginning with the obstacle course or this little flip right here. Action was definitely not lacking. I mean, I guess when you have two climaxes, that's what you get. But besides that, this movie was also just really funny. The part where Percy is standing on Luke's roof is subtle, yet hilarious.
Don't walk on my roof.
Plus, I legitimately laughed out loud when Percy and Annabeth started singing It's a Small World on the roller coaster into Polyphemus's cave. Like, this just really felt like Percy and Annabeth from the books.
Could you two just shut up?
And I once again think the best part of both films are the actors. They really shine in their performances, even if their characters aren't exactly like the book characters. Annabeth, Percy, and Grover once again have great chemistry, and Logan, Alexandria, and Brandon really have a powerful performance. Stanley Tucci as Mr. D shines. He was absolutely perfect, and he nailed the character to a T. Chiron was recasted with Anthony Head, but played an equally kind, powerful centaur. For me, Jake Abel once again has one of the best performances. In this film, he really gets a chance to shine as Luke. Douglas Smith plays an innocent, kind Tyson, and Levin Ramblin is the perfect, sassy, confident bully Clarice. Nathan Fillion also played a great Hermes, and I love that they added George and Martha. You can't have Hermes without George and Martha. So in conclusion, a horrible adaptation and an okay movie at best. I do think it's possible to enjoy both these films if you pretend the books don't exist, but overall I think it's best that they were canceled and that we're getting a reboot. Let me know what you thought of the Sea of Monsters movie adaptation. But for this week, that's all I have for you Half-Bloods, so I'm signing off. And please always remember to stay safe.